Welcome back to Cheeky Mare Stitches. We are going to start doing the Queen of Diamonds by Pink Door Fabrics. And I'm going to show you how to do it two-ish ways with machine piecing instead of English paper piecing. This pattern was originally done for English paper piecing, and I have done I've completed the English paper piecing part, the original pattern, and you can see my progress on that on my Whip Parade, and I will link it up here. But a lot of people don't have time to or the desire to English paper piece, so I am going to show how to adapt the pattern to get it more accessible to machine piecing. So the first thing that you're going to have to do is you're going to have to go to Pink Door Fabrics and buy the templates or the English paper piece papers. I'm not going to give you the measurements because this is not my pattern. So you either are going to have to go and get the acrylic templates or the paper pieces. And they're fairly expensive. They're about $70, but you can reuse them for things. I would personally buy the templates if you're only going to buy one, because you can fussy cut but easier with with the templates. So the templates do create a little bit of an issue with sewing. It's not a big issue. It's just different than most quilters are using. The templates have a 3/8 inch seam allowance all the way around. So you will have to adjust your normally 1/4 inch seam 1/8 to make it a 3/8 inch. Or you can use the paper pieces and an add a 1/4 ruler. Which is easier. I mean, you can do it with a regular ruler too, but I like the add a 1/4 because the papers make it so, it doesn't slip as much once you get it hooked on there. Okay, so we're going to do the blocks a little bit out of order because, and I'm just going to show you the front page of this. When I first did the block of the month, we started with this block here, but I'm going to do it a little bit out of order because it'll be easier to show how to do the paper pieced or the modifications easier with the smaller blocks. So I'm going to start with these 8 blocks up here. So there's 4 up here and 4 down low off screen. And I've already cut some of those out with the fabric that Tula used in her Tula version, which I will show a picture of right here. So these are the hot or the top colorways. And now I'm going to show how to cut the cooler or blue colorways. So I used the template. I used the X template to cut out the hot colorways, and I'm going to use a combination of the X template and the X papers to cut out the cool temperatures, and I'll mark on the back which one is going to have a 1/4 inch seam allowance, although it should be fairly easy to tell because one will be bigger. But the reason I'm not doing it all the same way is I do not have enough fabric to center this Dalmatian if I use the 3/8 inch seam allowance. So I'm using the paper piece with the add a 1/4 ruler to help me with that. All right, so the technique that I'm going to use, because this isn't clear, I can't guarantee that I'm fussy cutting it appropriately. So I figure out using the template, I get an approximation, and using the pictures online of this quilt, that Tula kept the gold part as much as possible in her block. So that means that the tip of this gold part is outside of the seam allowance. So it's in here, not in the seam allowance. So that is a good reference point. And these dots down here are also a good reference point. So I have marked the center point right here. I've marked the center point of this paper, and I'm going to line it up with the center of the gold part, the gold frame here. And there's also a line, which is nice. So I can travel my center point up that line until I get to just as it disappears into the gold disappears into my paper. So that means it's in the block part and not the seam allowance. And then I'm going to twist a little bit to get the dots in line. Now this is a pretty close 1/4 inch, but this is all the fabric I have, and so I'm going to use it. And I like that Dalmatian. It reminds me of my boxer mix that I had, Anya. And it's not quite a 1/4 inch, but that's okay. So I'm going to just drop it down a little bit so that it is a 1/4 inch. So that the full tip of that gold is not going to be there, but it's close enough for me. So now I'm just going to put my add a 1/4 around and cut around this template. And a rotating map might be good in this particular case, but I'm fairly comfortable. And if you're nervous about this moving, you can add a little bit of glue on the paper. There's the sew line glue. You can add some of that if it makes you feel more comfortable. And I know some people aren't ambidextrous, but I have trained myself to be fairly ambidextrous. So I'm going to cut left-handed. Oh, and I moved, so I'm going to find my points again. Make sure it stays lined up. Okay. Oops. All right, so there is my Dalmatian cut out with my paper piece and the add a 1/4 roller. And I'm going to mark on the back here that it's a 1/4 inch seam. Okay, so it's a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And that means that I need to cut out the mating pieces with a 1/4 inch seam allowance for this particular block. These I will cut out using the templates, and so they'll have a 3/8. So now I'm going to cut out the rest of the dogs that are needed, and I'll come back with the next step. Okay, so the cool tones require, like the cool tones shown in this picture here, wanted the Rottweiler. Well, I don't have, I didn't have a full one because I only had a 1/4 yard or a 1/3 of a yard, but here's where I cut it out. But I do have a full one of the warm Rottweiler. And I do have a poodle, a full poodle of the cool. So if this doesn't work, or I don't like the way it looks, I'm going to use the poodle. But I'm going to attempt to merge, because there's some warm colors in our Rottweiler. I'm going to attempt to merge them like this. And I had to cut it out using the 1/4 inch seam allowance. So I method because I didn't have enough up here for the 3/8. So I again used the paper piece with the add a quarter ruler, which I will be using here as well. So the cut here is down the center of this line here. And that is a 1/4 inch seam allowance, which is pretty much what I need. And I lined up, when I cut this one out, I lined up the edges here. I cut this a little bigger and then lined up the edges to get this the same size in the correct location. So now I just need a seam allowance on this side. So which side do I need to cut it? I want my seam to be down the center line here, because that's where it will be here. So that means I need a 1/4 inch this way of this seam to keep it. So I'm going to use my add a quarter ruler, and I'm going to line it up. And I can do this where I line it up on my mat here, so that this is square on my mat and this line is going through the reference point. And then I cut. So now it should be that there's an overlap of, when I sew these together, they'll come together like this, and it should be a 2-color but full Rottweiler. So we're going to try that, and if you see the next sequence and there's a poodle in the cold instead of the Rottweiler, you'll know why. Okay, so the next step for this project is going to be cutting the triangles that go with it. You need 3 to make this into a triangle itself, and it is template A. It's template A. For most of them, I will be using the template, because for most of them, I'm using a 3/8 seam allowance. There are 2 blocks that I will be using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So I will be cutting this fabric for this little Boston Terrier, this fabric for this Golden Retriever, this fabric for this Boston Terrier. I'm going to fussy cut the yellow and orange areas of this fabric for this poodle. The warm Dalmatian will be getting these stripes. The cool Dalmatian will be getting this fabric. This Golden Retriever will either be getting this one or fussy cut this one, because I didn't have the fabric exactly that Tula Pink had in her quilt, so I haven't decided which one I'm going to use. This one is closer, but I like this one better. So we'll see. This fabric also, I didn't have what Tula Pink used, so I am switching that out. And then I was successful with our Rottweiler here. It looks a little funky, but it's going to be on the bottom of the quilt, so I'm not too worried about it looking a little funky. And because it's on the cool side, I picked a blue fabric, but I wanted to incorporate something that kind of matched the other fabric to kind of pull it in. So I used this blue fabric that has this yellow in it. And these 2 fabrics I will be cutting with the paper piece and the add a quarter, and the rest of them I'll be using the template. So let me do that, and then we'll be ready to sew. All right, so I've cut all the pieces, and now I'm going to sew. I'm set up currently for my 1/4 inch seam allowance. So and that should just be your normal cuts, your normal seam allowance. And this is the blue, so that means the cold colors need to go where there's the bottom of the triangle is on the bottom of, like the base of the triangle is on the bottom of the dog. So the other reason why I like the templates is because they have engineered corners, so you just match them up. But with this particular, these are my 1/4 inch, so I used the paper pieces with the add a quarter ruler. So now I'm going to have to like make sure I have a 1/4 inch overhang here. I'm going to chain piece these. Hold those back. And I'm looking to make sure that there's a straight line or a close enough straight line. And there is. So that's good. That's a good sign anyway. And I did fussy cut these. So I'm making sure that the heart is going the same direction. Okay. So I'm not sure quite how I cut this off, but I did, so I just recut this. So luckily I had extra. I did fussy cut these as well, so I make sure that they're going in the right direction. And that one's a little bit off, but it'll be fine because it'll be in the seam allowance. I'm gonna get my scissors. You also don't have to cut the dog ears off when you have the engineered corners, which is nice as well. Okay, so I've got those two. Now I need to switch to my 3/8 inch. So I do know the settings for that too. I don't have it pre-programmed, so I do have to adjust. Okay. So now I have the engineered corners here. And now to double check that I'm doing the right seam allowance, my needle should be going in where the engineered corners start. Okay, so my needles, I changed needles recently, so my needle has adjusted a little bit. It's migrated. And so I need to adjust the position a little bit farther away from the foots to get the correct dimension here. And there we go. Now my threads are lining up with the engineered corners, or close enough for my taste here. And I put this on the wrong corner. So don't do what I did. I started with the cool ones because they were my 1/4 inch, but I should have stuck with the cool ones until I had them all finished because I sewed the first one in the wrong orientation of the hot ones. So I'm going to follow my own advice and do the cool ones again. And that way I can not have to think as much. So remember, the cool ones get the bottom of the base of the triangle on the bottom of the dog. The hot ones get the base of the triangle on the top of the dog. And if you're good at switching your mind, you could chain piece all of them, but because I've already I've already sewn one of the hot ones backwards, I'm going to just continue the likes with like. Okay, there are the cool ones done. So now we can start with the hot ones. Okay, so remember the hot ones. The hot ones get the base of the triangle on the top. So this is what it's going to look like. Base of the triangle on top. Some of these I fussy cut and some of them I didn't. Like the Boston Terrier, I didn't fussy cut because it's too random to matter. There is a direction, but I didn't care because it's not going to be noticeable. But because there's a color change in this one, I did fussy cut by putting the tip of my template in the seam allowance on the yellow here. So make sure that the orange, or however you decide to fussy cut, make sure that the fussy cut is consistent around your whole block. Like I fussy cut these as well so that the stripe will point towards the Dalmatian. So make sure, if you're going to take the time to fussy cut. So that would be wrong. This would be wrong because I fussy cut it. So I need to rotate it around, make the stripes point towards the Dalmatian. Or in my case, the closest thing that looks like my boxer mix, Anya. I like the way the stripes were cut. Kind of gives a little frame around that golden retriever. Although I've had a bad experience with Goldens, so they're not my favorite dog. I know each dog is individual, so I try to treat them that way, but they get a strike one in pencil. My neighbor had a standard poodle growing up. She was nice. Her name was Lizzie. She was super hyper though, so he had to like take her on like 4 or 5 mile walks a day. He was retired, so he had the time. But I almost bought a Boston Terrier in college because I like the Mastiff looking breeds, and I couldn't have a large dog in the apartment that I was in. But I held off and waited till I could get Anya, my 65-pound boxer mix. So I switched apartments. Anyway, those are the hot ones done. Now, the ones that I did a 1/4 inch seam allowance and the ones that I did an 1/8 inch or 3/8 inch seam allowance should still be relatively the same size. The 1/4 inch one should just probably be about a 1/4 inch smaller. So let's lay one on top and see if that is the case. So these seams line up, which is what we want. Anywhere there's a finished edge, we want them to line up. You know, you want them to be the same size. And anywhere there's not a finished edge, the 1/4 inch seam allowance is going to be a little bit smaller. And that's what we have. So we did that. We did that correctly, or I did that correctly. So now I just need to remember when I do the sashing that the sashing for this will be a 1/4 inch seam allowance, and the sashing for this one will be a 3/8 seam allowance. But the way they do it in the pattern, after you do the sashing, the like first border sashing, because there's 2 sashings, then everything else is done with a 1/4 inch anyway, because it's not paper pieced after you get the sashings done. And so I won't have to remember that much past today. So those are our blocks, 8 of them. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial and that it was helpful. It's probably not as helpful until we get to the actual blocks that are harder to piece, because I'm going to show you techniques to make it more machine piece friendly without having to do Y seams. We did do this little nifty seam here where the Rottweiler is 2-toned, which can be applied not only for piecing 2 different fabrics, but if you make a cutting error and you want to make it look like there is no seam, I mean, because look at that, you have to really pull it apart to miss that, or to know that there's a seam there up here where it's not as obvious as the 2-tone Rottweiler. Anyway, join me next time we will be starting now after we've done these with block number 1. And I'm going to be doing one video of the long arm quilting and one video of these per week, so we can get a little bit more variety. Have a good day. Bye-bye.